obviously I've had friends who've died, and one in particular, friend of mine, Rodrigo, who you might have met him, I don't know, who ran the assemblage, and as he was going through his dying process, he and I were having conversations, cosmic conversations, and I had a series of deep understandings about the gene keys, about my work with the gene keys, and I'd looked at you'll remember from the activation sequence, like that unlocks your genius, and I had this series of revelations through my talks with him, as he got closer, of a reversal of that sequence. I thought, wow, this is how you come in, and then reversing it is how you go out. And so I suddenly understood, like, as he was leaving, this process of compassionate closure, how you finish a life, not just a life actually, but how you close anything. It could be a relationship, how you die in anything. It has the same sequence, and in the middle is the dissolution of the ego. You have to go through that. And then there's your karmic legacy. What, if you're finishing a relationship, what's the legacy of, what have you left here? What are the best things about this relationship that you've left? How can you remember it in the best way? And how can you tie off all those loose ends as best you can, because it depends on the other person, like, so that it ends in a compassionate way if possible. And even like down to, like, often when relationships end, there's money problems, and there's it could be custodial problems of children and all that. So you have to kind of think from a point of view of, like, I'm dying. I don't want any loose ends left here. I don't want to leave the other person resentful and miserable and always feeling like I've won. I want them to feel, I'd rather they felt like they'd won, and if you can, if you can get past that, that's even better. But you don't want a hook left, and you don't want any hooks left. So I practice this, not that I have relationships that end, but they do inevitably end. And yes, I have had some that have ended, unexpectedly. And I've wanted to tie up, I've wanted to kind of finish things graciously as best as possible. So it's practice for death. Relationships and life are practice for death. And Rodrigo really taught me that as he was dying, and that you fall into the arms of the mother. That's after the ego starts to go through its dissolution process. And again, in relationships, you will have to let your ego dissolve, because there's going to be battles maybe sometimes. You're going to have to let it go. You're going to have to let things go that you don't want to let go. You might have to surrender, a sense of rightness or justice sometimes, and just to be clean, just to be free. And then when you're free, you're like, oh, wow, that was really worth letting go of. And the ego's dissolved, and then you're into the arms of the mother, dissolved into the arms of the mother. And that was what Rodrigo did. He surrendered at the end into the arms of the mother, and this love, as often is the way when someone's dying consciously. Well, it is always the way that this beautiful grace comes and pours out and hits every single person that's involved with that being. And so it's beautiful seeing, and my father dying as well. It's beautiful seeing that, how my intimacy with him increased after he died. Mm. How weird is that? Yeah. It was difficult to say for a while to people, but because I didn't want people to think I was in some kind of denial of my grief. But that was what I felt, still feel. Like my father is more accessible to me than he ever was when he was alive. Because there's none of that patina of stuff in the way. Right. It's just heart to heart. And so people don't die. And it's not that they just, if I say they live on in my heart, I don't mean that's like as a memory. I actually mean they genuinely live on in my soul, in my heart, in the eternal part of my being. That being is always going to be there. It may not be my father in the next circle, right? But it's an energy signature that I am eternally connected to and grateful to, and so happy to see again. Yeah. when I see it again. Right. And yeah, so I think my death, my relationship to death has been all about love and relationships. And I mean, I see it now. Like I fall in love with people so easily. And I kind of feel, you know, when you do that and you feel this like, oh, there's almost a bittersweet that comes with it, because you know you're going to have to say goodbye to them again.
Right.
And it's like, oh God. But then there's such beauty in it as well. And you know that the forms are always changing. And the same with life and death. It's like the forms are changing. But, you know, we just, you know, the first breath and the last breath are a pair, you know? Because they're the only lone breaths. All other breaths are pairs, right? Except for the first and the last, they're a pair. And so they kind of create this, the whole life is just between that in-breath and that out-breath. But then that out-breath is connected to the next in-breath. It's paired with the next life. How can it not be? And it's not linear. It's just, it's flow. I mean, I had this awareness recently that death is flow. Death is flow. That was a great sentence. Death is not this kind of, it's flow. You flow right into the next stage. I mean, you might kind of come in with a shock, but you will flow through into the arms of the next mother, literally, into the arms of the great mother, but also the arms of the next mother. And when and how that is a mystery.